My name is Owen Bishop. I've spent the last 8 years investigating disappearances, mostly cold cases that the local police buried under stacks of paperwork and dust. Yet none of them ever felt like this one. None of them ever made me doubt the nature of reality itself. Everything began with a local legend in Harrow's End, a forgotten town off the shoreline of Lake Superior. People there whispered about a nurse named Claire Dalton, a kind woman who worked the night shift at the old Hollow Creek Hospital. On a fog-soaked evening in October 1978, she clocked out of work at midnight and started her usual walk home along the main road. She never made it. No trace of her body, purse, or uniform was ever found. Just the echo of her footsteps that locals swore they could hear some nights, fading into the mist. The case had gone unsolved for 47 years when I arrived in Harrow's End. The hospital had been abandoned for decades, but I managed to get permission to enter using my credentials from the news agency I freelance for. Little did I know that stepping into that building would change my understanding of the human mind and perhaps of time itself. The first thing that hit me was the smell. Damp wood, mold, and something faintly metallic. The long corridor stretched ahead, like a mouth waiting to swallow me. My flashlight beam caught broken gurneys, shattered glass, and faded signs that read radiology and maternity. Each step stirred up a hush, as if the building itself were holding its breath. When I reached the nurse's station, I found something odd, a small clipboard lying perfectly in the center of the counter without a speck of dust. The paper on it was dated October 17, 1978, the night Claire disappeared. My stomach tightened. The ink looked fresh. I brushed my finger across it. It smeared. Maybe someone had left the prop, I told myself. Some urban explorer playing tricks. But then I noticed faint footprints leading from the counter into the dark hallway. They were bare-no shoes and small, as if made by a woman's feet damp with water. I followed them. At the end of the corridor stood a door with a faded red cross painted across it. My flashlight flickered as I reached for the handle. The instant my palm touched the cold metal, a scent of antiseptic filled the air, sharp and unnatural. The hospital seemed to hum faintly, like an old generator powering up after decades of silence. Then I heard her. A soft, slow humming like a lullaby from the next room. "Hello?" I called, my voice cracked from the tension. "Is someone there?" The humming stopped. A chill ran through me. I pushed the door open, and a wave of icy air spilled out. Inside, the moonlight poured through broken blinds onto a single hospital bed. Sheets untouched, equipment rusted. But on the bed clear, as they lay, a nurse's cap, still white, still creased with recent use. I took a shaky breath. My flashlight flickered again, then went out entirely. I pulled my phone from my pocket, its weak glow barely illuminating the scene. And that's when I saw movement in the reflection on a glass cabinet across the room. Someone, a woman, was standing right behind me. When I turned around, there was only empty space. But the air smelled like disinfectant and lavender soap, the same scent the nurses used in the 70s. According to the records I'd read, that was the first night in Hollow Creek Hospital. And though I didn't know it yet, the building wasn't abandoned. Not in the way most people think. The second night, the town pressed in on me like a living thing. All porches and pale eyes and weather-beaten clapboard, where folks still locked doors with hooks instead of latches, as if a hook could hold back whatever moved through the fog here. The local diner, Marie's, had a chalkboard menu and a wall clock that always ran 10 minutes slow, and the waitress with the beehive hair called me Hun and pretended not to listen, while I asked questions about Claire Dalton. People don't forget a nurse who treated their kids for fevers and sat with their dying fathers when the roads iced over, but they also don't like saying her name after dark. By the time I slid a 20 under the coffee mug and stepped into the night, the mist had pooled in the gutters and crept across my shoes like a cat's tail. I told myself I was going back to the hospital for evidence, to test the ink on that clipboard like a good reporter would. But the truth is simpler. Something there had noticed me, and that felt more honest than most people do. On the path behind the hospital, aspens clicked their thin fingers, and beyond them, Lake Superior muttered under the fog, a vast body with a sleeping mind. The parking lot was a fossil bed of tire ruts and broken glass, the kind that catches whatever light is left and makes it look like eyes. My flashlight felt smaller than the night before, or maybe the dark had learned my edges. Inside, Hollow Creek breathed. Old buildings do. They expand and contract with temperature, huff in the drafts, pop like knuckles. But this was a steadier rhythm, a metronome just off tempo, as though somewhere someone counted time in a room I hadn't seen yet. The nurse's station sat in a cone of silence, the clipboard exactly where I had left it, the smear on the date now set and dull like a dried scab. The footprints were gone. Dust lay unbroken from counter to hall, except for a single perfect O of moisture, the size of a heel, at the doorway to the old surgical wing. There's a superstition about abandoned places. Enter with respect. Ask permission without using words. Leave something behind so the place knows you'll return. I laid a copper penny on the counter, an old habit from my father, who believed every building had a landlord you couldn't see. Then I turned toward surgery and felt the temperature fall through my jacket, clean and sudden, as if a freezer door had opened somewhere deep inside the walls. The surgical wing was a corridor of dark mouths. Doors hung ajar, window slits grayed with grime, gurneys parked like carriages, waiting for horses that would never come. My beam found a wall clock with no hands and a calendar pinned beneath it. November 1978, weeks after. Claire vanished. Every day crossed out, but the final Thursday left blank. In an OR marked 2B, the overhead lights were dead, but the skylight bled a smear of moon, and the tiles shone wet near the drain, as if mopped 10 minutes before I arrived. The humming began again. A sane tune, slow and low, the way a person hums to keep their hands steady. I froze, not out of fear, but to listen the way a hunter does, where the sound lives in the room, what shape it has against the air. It wasn't behind me this time. It nested in the vents, in the old tin ducts, traveling forward, drawing me like a string pulls a kite. Claire? I said, and the name felt too familiar, like I'd stolen it. The humming broke, paused, and in the pause, a single word whispered through the ductwork. Stay. Not a command, not a plea, more like a test, to see which kind of man I was. I moved toward the sound and found a narrow service door with a rusted latch. The flashlight dizzied across flaking paint. A stencil, barely legible sub-level access. Every hospital has spaces beneath the living floors where boilers grumble and pipes. Sweat and forgotten carts keep their own counsel, and these are where the stories gather like lint in a pocket. The latch gave with a sound like a cork pulled from an old bottle, and the smell that rose was neither rot nor chemical, but rain on hot dust, the ghost of summer storms. The stairs were concrete, and counted me as I went 23. 24 and a 32, the humming resolved into something else. Feet on tile, not mine. I killed my light and stood in the milk dark, letting the basement shape itself around me. There was a glow below, not electric, more like moon reflected in water, moving, distorting. When I stepped off the last riser, my shoes skimmed a thin film of damp, and a chill threaded my socks. The sub-level was a spine of corridors with ribs of storage rooms, and the glow slid along the floor ahead, turning corners just before I reached them, as though someone carried a bowl of pale fire. On the fourth turn, a room opened with rows of lockers, their doors dented like hammered tin, each with a nameplate clouded by time. I wiped one with my sleeve. Dalton C. The metal felt colder than the others, and when I tugged the handle, it stuck and then relented with a soft sigh, the way a sleeping person exhales. Inside hung a cardigan the color of lake water, a hairbrush with 5 blonde strands, threaded like gold floss, and a folded paper bag crinkled to softness. The hair didn't turn to dust. It clung to the brush as if waiting for a palm to warm it. I lifted the paper bag and felt weight. A coin purse, 2 aspirin tablets in foil, and a ring tied with a length of cotton string, the kind nurses aren't supposed to wear on duty. The ring was plain, a man's band, scuffed on one side, and when I touched it, my breath fogged hard enough to hurt. Something moved in the reflection of the locker door shape, shoulder and jaw, the outline of a woman in a cap standing just to my left. I turned slow, holding the ring out like a passport. No one stood there, but the damp brightened, the floor gleaming with that soft water light, and I heard, very clearly, the squeak of shoes pivoting on tile, as if a person had turned to face me. "Claire," I said again, softer, "I'm not here to take anything from you." The ductwork clicked once, like a tongue against a tooth. Then the glow gathered itself and slipped under the far door, toward a corridor I hadn't seen on the old plans. A passage with no number, just a painted word. Tunnel. Hospitals built by the lake used tunnels' winter access to outbuildings, a way to move laundry and food, and sometimes the dead when the snow got tall as eaves. This tunnel sloped gently down, and with every step the walls changed, plaster giving to brick, brick to stone, and the air cooled from autumn basement to late March riverbank. My light caught markings etched into the stone, a compass rose scratched over and over. North bent a few degrees east, as if whoever drew it refused the idea of true north. Halfway down, the floor pitched slightly, and water lapped my ankles. A pulse thudded under the water, not mechanical. The kind felt in your molars when thunder walks across a field. The glow halted around a bend, waited like a patient dog, and when I reached it, the tunnel opened into a chamber that didn't fit any hospital. A round room with a domed ceiling beaded with calcite, and in the center, a pool black as negative space. There are places on Earth where a room asks a question without words, and if you answer wrong, the rest of your life is spent learning the right answer. I stood at the lip and held the ring on its string, and the pool's surface took my face and made it older. Added 30 winters, drew lines I recognized from my father. Then it smoothed, erased me, and showed a corridor lit by fluorescence, clean and bright, where a woman in a nurse's uniform walked with a paper bag in her hand. She turned her head as if someone had called her name, and the air rippled between us like heat over asphalt. The hum returned, louder not from ducks now, but from the water itself, the pitch dropping until it was almost a voice, and the shape of words wavered. Stay on the road. It was a warning, the kind drivers get in blizzard country where the ditch hides under white and lures tires into silence. Claire had walked home along the main road, and she had never arrived. The pool changed again, a yellow line down the center of blacktop, fog stacked in layers, and a figure just at the margin where high beams fail. I tucked the ring into my pocket. The act felt like a promise and a theft in the same breath. The glow dimmed, then slid up the wall and flared across a seam in the stone, outlining a door-sized rectangle that hadn't been visible before. I pressed my palm to the seam, and the cold bit deep, so clean it was almost sweet. The stone shifted not open, not yet, but enough to let a draft through carrying a smell I knew from childhood storms on the lake. Wet iron, ozone, and the far edge of lightning. Behind me, something stepped into the tunnel water with a sound like a hand pushed into a coat pocket. Soft, steady, bare feet. They stopped an arm's length away. A fingertip, cool and damp, touched the back of my wrist as if guiding my hand to the right place along the seam. The stone relented another breath. Then, so low I almost missed it, the voice that wasn't air said, "Hurry." The seam in the stone gave under my palm the way old leather does resistant, then suddenly intimate, as if it remembered the shape of a hand that wasn't mine. The cold climbed my arm, not a sting but a clarity, and the door-sized outline trembled like a diaphragm drawing breath. The fingertip at my wrist pressed once patient, almost encouraging, and withdrew. The sound of bare feet in shallow water stepped back exactly 3 paces, as if making room for whatever came next. When the stone moved, it didn't swing. It receded, a slow sinking that left a rectangle of deeper dark. A draft sighed out, carrying a smell like struck flint and wild onion after rain. My beam found a narrow passage beyond, lined not with hospital brick, with quarried blocks stacked by hands that knew how to make time behave. The mortar had a glitter to it, flecks that caught the light and held it a fraction too long, like snow under starlight. Stay on the road, the water had told me. This wasn't a road. It was a throat. But the way forward had a gravity that made argument feel childish. I stepped through. Past the threshold, sound changed. The hospital hush became a denser silence, the sort you find in caves where words decide to hibernate. My breath went soft to keep from waking anything. The floor rose a little, then leveled, and the walls pinched closer until shoulders brushed stone. Etchings scored the blocks at shoulder-height concentric ovals, a line through each like an eye crossed out. Between the ovals, someone had scratched numbers, not in sequence, but in pairs with an arrow tying them. 2311, 713. I knew enough to feel foolish guessing. The glow that had guided me didn't enter. It held at the scene behind like a lighthouse that refuses to leave shore. I palmed the ring in my pocket cool gold, the cotton string faintly damp, and kept moving. The passage opened at last into a room that had no place beneath a hospital. A long, low hall buttressed by timber ribs, air dry and mineral. The ceiling painted with something that time had choked, but not erased. I tilted my light. The paint wasn't paint at all. It was salt-crusted in patterns, rivers, arteries, lightning forks, all converging on a single knot at the far end. At that knot waited a wooden door. It was a farmhouse door, absurdly ordinary, with 6 panels and a thumb latch bitten by rust. The grain had a figure like running water. On the upper panel, someone had burned a simple image, a straight road with a circle at the end. The circle was not quite closed. I put my ear to the wood. On the other side, a faint electrical tick whispered like a Geiger counter in a room that had forgotten how to glow. The tick gathered into rhythm slow, then accelerating, then slow again, as if a second hand kept changing its mind. I lifted the latch. It stuck, then yielded with a hollow cluck. What lay beyond was not a room, but an interval. Light stretched, not bright, not dim, more the color of air after a storm when the sun hides behind your shoulder. The space had the suggestion of walls, because the sound came back to me. But my light refused to stick to anything but one detail. A raised strip down the center, painted the pale yellow of highway lines baked too many summers. On either side, darkness pooled like fields at dusk. The line ran forward and backward, dissolving into a fog that didn't belong to any humidity in my experience. "Stay on the road," the pool had said. The sense of it clicked into place like a seatbelt. I put my right foot on the painted strip and felt a rasp of grit under my sole, familiar as Midwestern county blacktop. I put my left foot beside it and began to walk. With the first 10 steps, memories surfaced the way fish do at evening rise. My father steering the old Ford along County H, one hand at 12 o'clock, knuckles pale. My mother tapping the dash when the heater stuttered. The smell of hay through cracked seals in August. The line under me felt like an oath I had once sworn without knowing what it meant. On step 11, something moved just beyond the shoulder of the dark, a shape pacing me at the edge of my vision. On step 12, it breathed. Narrow shoulders, a woman's voice said, conversational, as if she were commenting to herself about the space, the world, or both. The air cooled on my cheeks. "And you didn't wear a hat." The tone had a nurse's veteran tenderness, the sort that slit through bluster and found the truth a man would rather keep to himself. "Claire?" I kept my eyes on the line. "Looking off a road in fog is how you steer into grief." Pause. Then, nearer, the whisper of cotton at a knee. "You brought it." Not a question. The ring warmed half a degree in my pocket, the metal answering to a voice that had touched it more years ago than my age wanted to do math with. "I have it," I said. "If it's yours." "It's his," she said. The pronoun arrived like a stone thrown from a field you can't see. "He didn't wear it that night. I told him to." We argued in the break room. The coffee had gone to mud. The fog thinned 3 steps ahead, making a window the size of a menu. In it, 2 figures seated at a round table lit by a vending machine's bleary glow. A nurse in a cardigan the color of lake water, cap pinned just off center, and a man in an orderly's jacket, his hands big and unshowy. He rolled a ring across his knuckles, like a magician who knows one trick. She frowned with the sort of love that survives frowns. "You were seen," I said. "The night you walked home." The window dimmed. The road continued. "You didn't arrive." "There was an edge," she said. "You don't expect edges in a place you understand." The town, the lake, the road, I knew them better than I knew my own face. But winter teaches roads new shapes. Fog teaches them not to care. "An edge," I repeated. "Where the ditch wasn't." The sentence had the shape of a joke a practical person makes to survive an impractical thing. I stepped off to let a truck pass. He was late. He was always late with deliveries, and when I stepped back, my foot found nothing that matched what I remembered. It was like stepping onto a picture of the road drawn by a hand that hadn't seen one. I kept walking. The line stayed true. The thing pacing me drifted closer, and the scent of lavender soap came with its old recipe. Sharp and clean as a household, with 1 income and 3 kids and a woman who keeps the windows open in March, because the sun finally said it was okay. "What is this?" I asked. "Where are we walking?" "Between," she said simply, and I realized there was a relief in her voice. Here, at least, the rules had declared themselves. There's a way through some places where the understory runs alongside the road. Hunters know it. Sailors know it. Nurses do too, when we walk home with tired heads. "Can you come back with me?" The question left my mouth before wisdom had time to dress it. "If I leave something," she said. "Not always the same something. That's why they find shoes. Sometimes it's the years. Sometimes it's the shape of your laugh. And sometimes it's the person who waited with you in the break room when the coffee went to mud." The steps counted themselves while my mind worked the arithmetic of bargains. I felt the ring again. The cotton string kinked where a knot had been retied by someone nervous to get it right. Your man, what was his name?" "Earl," she said, and the road loosened under my feet like a sigh. "He never did like the ring. Said a circle doesn't have a good place to grip." "He's gone," I said, gentle. "Most are," she answered, not wounded, not resigned, just recording a fact. Ahead, the fog peeled back in a widening arc. A sign rose out of the gray, green with white letters, as if the state had posted it for ghosts. "Hollow Creek, 1 mile." The arrow pointed to my left, off the line. "Don't," she said, quick. "That points to where a map thinks it is. Maps don't come down here." "Then how?" The line ran on, faithful, humble. "You carry a piece of what was lost," she said, "and you return it where it knows you." The ring burned warmer, like a coin on a windowsill at noon. Roads love a circle if you ask them right. A second sign blossomed, impossible this deep in weather. Pedestrian crossing. The silhouette on the yellow diamond was a woman mid-step, head turned as if someone had said her name. My throat tightened in a way I didn't care to narrate. Tell me what happened after the edge, I said. Not yet, she answered. First pay the landlord. Somewhere behind and below the pitch of the world shifted. A long, slow creak traveled the way a sound does when timbers answer wind, except there was no wind, only intention. The sense of the hospital returned like a rhyme you'd forgotten. Pipes, distance, a faint antiseptic tang under the earth. The road narrowed until the yellow strip became a thread, and that thread climbed up through the interval, toward the shape of a door I had already opened. Put it back, she said, where my hand knew it in the mornings. The locker room. Row 3, fourth from the left, Dalton, C, the cardigan, the brush, the paper bag soft as a bruise. I could see them without seeing. The door's threshold met my toes. Will you be there? I asked. You'll smell lavender, she said, and the pacing shape withdrew, wearing the sound of bare feet in shallow water like a shawl. The farmhouse door's thumb latch kissed my palm again, familiar now. When it opened, the sub-level's stale breath filled my lungs like the first honest air after a faint. The glow pooled at the floor, no longer an animal leading me, but a lamp someone had left for latecomers. I stepped through, and behind me the interval folded with the soft, predatory neatness of a letter slid back into its envelope. Back in the locker room, the metal remembered me. The nameplate clouded my time, the handle's reluctant sigh. Inside, the cardigan waited with its lake water patience. I drew the paper bag, set it on the bench, and laid the ring still tied on the cotton string in the center as carefully as a communion wafer. Lavender rose like a summer ghost. The locker door eased toward me until it touched my fingers and stopped, as if to say, leave it and we'll speak again. The moment before the latch clicked, I heard a sound that did not belong to buildings or water or human breath. It was small and exact, and it came from the tunnel behind. A shoe sole turning on tile, rubber against gloss. Not bare feet, not mine. A patient pivot. Then a man's cough, short, practiced, designed to announce without threatening how an orderly clears his throat when he enters a room after midnight. Earl, I asked the dark. The ducks clicked their tongue against their teeth. The glow dimmed, then brightened, and went still. Somewhere in the sub-level, something that had been waiting a very long time decided to move. The cough came again, closer, as if the tunnels had good manners and carried sound ahead like a calling card. The glow near the floor thinned to a wick, and the locker room shadows squared their shoulders. I closed Claire's locker with 2 fingertips and felt the latch settle into place like a secret filing itself where it belongs. Working late? The voice was even, Midwestern, the vowels worn smooth by long shifts and night coffee. A man stepped into the doorway, not young, not old, one of those faces time respects because it recognizes itself. He wore a jacket the color of old mop water, sleeves rolled twice, a name patch frayed to ghost letters. He kept his hands where I could see them, empty, palms forward. Looking, I said. My own voice sounded like it had rehearsed honesty and wasn't sure how it fit. For what? He didn't smile, but the corners of his eyes changed, not unkindly. A person who didn't arrive, I said. Claire Dalton. He let the name sit between us like a basin someone had half filled and set on a bedside table. You found her locker. It found me, I said, and wished I'd chosen fewer words. He nodded like a man who has seen different kinds of truth and keeps a shelf for all of them. You shouldn't be down here alone. I wasn't, I said. Until now. He glanced past me at the seam of the hall, the damp that still filmed the floor. His jaw worked once, twice, like a man deciding whether to lift something heavy without help. I'm Earl, he said, as if that explained the deciding. The name struck the air so softly, it made no ripple, and then it made too many. You, I started, and then stopped, because names down here were like latches. You touched them and doors moved. She sent you to put it back, he said. His eyes flicked to the locker, then to my pocket. Not greedy, not suspicious, only exact. I took the ring out, the cotton string bright against the metal. Earl's throat flexed once. He didn't reach for it. He didn't step closer. Instead, he leaned his shoulder against the doorframe, the way a man rests in his own doorway at home when the day has been long and mostly fair. She liked that string, he said. Said it kept the circle honest. You argued about the ring, I said, in the break room. Coffee gone to mud. He huffed a laugh that had no comedy in it, and all of love. I wanted to wear it when I remembered it. She wanted me to remember it because I wore it. His gaze slid to the floor as if memory had been painted there once and had scuffed away with traffic. How are you here? I asked. The question arrived raw. She said if someone leaves, they leave something. Shoes, years, a laugh. Sometimes it's the argument, he said. Sometimes it's the apology you didn't make because you planned to make it later. The ductwork ticked like insect legs in a window frame. Behind Earl, deeper in the sublevel, the air changed pressure, the way it does in storms when a door opens 2 rooms away. He lifted his head, listening with all the muscles, the way men born to barns and boiler rooms learn to do. We don't have much time, he said. For what? The locker metal cooled under my fingertips, grateful and unreadable. For explaining why a road can forget you and still be blamed for it, he said. And why hospitals grow tunnels where they don't plan to. He walked, and I matched, our steps finding the shallow water's patience. We passed the service door, where the seam still dreamed of being open. Earl didn't look at it. He led me down a parallel corridor I hadn't noticed, a carpenter's alley of pipes and shut-off valves, each tagged with a metal flag stamped with numbers and the names of old companies that had gone to rust in other towns. He carried a flashlight, but he kept it low, like a priest with a candle. Up top, the hospital was built to a blueprint that made accountants feel safe, he said. Down here, the ground had other ideas. They found cavities when they poured the footings. Old channels cut by water when the world was younger and more direct. The contractors filled what they could and bridged what they couldn't. They told themselves, concrete tells the truth better than limestone does. And did it? My breath ghosted in the beam, then the beam reddened it like a cigarette. Concrete tells the truth you ask it to, he said. Limestone tells the truth it remembers. He stopped at a junction box and flipped a breaker without looking. Somewhere, a relay clicked like a castanet. A low hum wove into the air, the kind that makes fluorescent tubes think about waking. We came to a door that wasn't a farmhouse door or a hospital door, but a school door. Narrow window, wire mesh glass, push bar with scratches that had learned the shape of rings and keys. Through the mesh, a room waited that had pretended to be many things. Shelves made from doors laid over file cabinets held boxes of gauze, out-of-date textbooks, a wooden model of a spine gone ivory with dust. On the wall, someone had tacked a map of the county. A coffee ring stained the lake a darker blue. Earl pushed through, crossed to the map, and tapped a finger against the shoreline north of town. Here, the old road used to run closer to the water, he said, before they widened it and straightened it to keep the snowplows from sliding into the trees. They shaved off a curve and gave it a new shoulder. Left the old grade like a scar in the pines. Claire walked the new one, I said. She walked both, he said. He slid his finger along 2 lines the map didn't admit were 2. Fog came down and laid the old on top of the new, the way a mother lays a blanket over a sleeping child. And when she stepped for the shoulder, her foot landed in a year that wasn't ready to hold her. I felt the room tilt a degree, not physically, but in the way a compass needle decides to pick a new north. You sound like a man who's rehearsed that sentence. I had time, he said. He looked at the map like a man reading a headstone. Time in a hallway under the world with a door that breathes. Why didn't you go after her? The question came out sharper than I intended. Men have a way of asking other men why they chose the same fear. I did, he said, and the evenness of his voice made me wish I deserved it. Not that night. Not at first. I told myself she was ahead of me in the fog. I told myself I'd see her porch light when I rounded the next bend. I told myself a lot of things men tell themselves, so they can feel like they're still the kind who can lift something heavy without help. And later, I felt where the world had a seam. He turned away from the map and looked at the door with the wire mesh window, not the farmhouse door, but kin to it through function, if not blood. I found the way in. I walked the line. I learned the rules the hard way. You leave something if you go far. I had a ring to leave. It wasn't enough. What did you leave? The air near the ceiling flickered as if thinking about lightning. My noon, he said after a long time. It's always morning or it's always night. That's the bargain I made without reading it. We let that sit. It had weight and a shape and the kind of truth that makes rooms quieter. She asked you to bring the ring back? I said. She asked me to ask you. He smiled then, a small thing, and it did what smiles do in places that don't deserve them. It stitched some torn fabric. You still have all your noon. She could tell by the way you hesitated before stepping into the dark. The fluorescence took the hint and shivered awake. Two of them, casting the room in a missened daylight. In that light, Earl looked more like what he was. A man who had carried more bodies than most and done it gently. A nick on his knuckle had healed as a white comma. His eyes were lake water green when the wind is low. What happens now? I asked. Now you go upstairs, he said. You will think the hospital has let you go because it is polite and old. You will walk out to the parking lot and the night will feel too big for its skin. You will sleep at Marie's in the room with the bad painting of birches. In the morning, you will carry the ring back to where the road remembers. And you will stand on the line and you will listen for the sound that tells you the map is lying. And you? I asked. I'll be where men are when they're between, he said. Close enough to hear a cough and far enough not to scare you off the right mistake. He walked me back through the corridors without asking if I wanted to be walked. The locker room breathed lavender and old iron. At the nurse's station, the clipboard lay like a tide chart from a year that misbehaved. The smudge on the date had dried into a gloss the color of dried blood on brown paper. We stood in the main hall where signs for radiology and maternity pointed into small histories, and the exit sign burned its wise red. One more thing, Earl said. He kept his eyes on the door as if saying the thing required not looking at me. When you get to the place on the road where the fog makes two pictures, don't call her name. Shuttered if you do. And turning is how you get lost twice. What should I say? My hand found the bar of the exit the way you find a stair with your toe. Tell her the coffee's fresh, he said, and the smile that wasn't big did something enormous. I stepped into the night. The parking lot, fossil bed of ruts and glass, held a moon the color of a nickel. The lake exhaled. The air tasted like rain rehearsing. Behind me, the hospital gathered itself the way old buildings do when the door stops swinging, counting its rooms, counting its beds, counting its names. In my pocket, the ring tugged at the string like a fish testing a line. At Marie's, the upstairs room did have a painting of birches, and the pillow kept secrets from other heads. I set the ring on the knitstand and turned off the lamp, and the dark settled without malice. Sometime near the hour, when bars close and nurses take their first break, I woke to the smell of lavender and the feeling that someone sat at the foot of the bed and told me a joke I couldn't remember in the morning. When I woke for good, the ring was cool again, and the sunrise made the lake look like a sheet of hammered tin, useful, honest, and ready to be marked. I ate eggs under the clock that ran 10 minutes slow. Marie asked if I was staying another night. Depends how the road treats me, I said. She nodded like a woman who has heard both kinds of answers. When I stepped outside, the fog was waiting. Not theatrical, just routine. The way the planet exerts its small uncaring on any given day. At the north end of town, where the new asphalt lifts a little to keep from drowning in April, a gravel pull-off scarred the ditch. Pines pressed close, jealous. I parked the way you do when you don't plan to stay long, and know you will. The ring in my pocket had learned the walk. The yellow line down the center had the faded dignity of a rule that still works. Stay on the road, I said to no one. The fog folded its arms. And from somewhere behind the trees, a man's cough answered, brief and exact, like the sound a person makes when they are exactly where they promise to be. Fog makes its own weather, and that morning it made a country where sound traveled short and light traveled soft. The yellow line under my boots had that old county grit, sand and salt ground into paint by winters that taught men how to slow down without asking their permission. Pines crowded the shoulders like parishioners who had come to listen without being seen. Somewhere behind them, water worked itself into small tempers against the rocks. Coffee's fresh, I said to the air, and the air leaned an inch closer, like a person who pretends they didn't hear you the first time, so you'll say it again. Coffee's fresh, I repeated, and my voice came back with the thin confidence of a man who trusts a rule he didn't write. The road answered, not with words, but with a change in texture, the way a scar answers a fingertip. The right-of-way shifted under my feet, not enough to trip a sober man, just enough to tell a careful man that something had been built here, unbuilt and built again. The fog layered itself, whites on grays. The way cake is iced by a hand that keeps checking the clock. Ahead, a shape made of absence took form, a curve that was no longer a curve, outlined by memory. I walked the yellow line the way a boy walks a fence rail to show he can. 10 steps, 15. At 17, the world to my left thickened, like a photograph bleaching into visibility. A narrow lane revealed itself in pale negatives. Old asphalt bleeding through gravel, a ditch that remembered being deeper, a signpost without a sign. The map's lie lay there like a folded letter. I kept my eyes on the line and spoke to it. You love a circle if asked right, I said, and the ring warmed my thigh through denim. A coin on a sill at noon in July. She needs a return. Bare feet whispered in the fog one step, two keeping pace just off my shoulder. The lavender came and went on the breeze the way good advice comes and goes in a man's head. I knew enough not to turn. When the truck passed, I said, to the fog, to the line, to the woman who didn't want me to say her name, you stepped aside. The road slid out of plumb with the world, and you put your weight into a year that couldn't hold it. A shape took up residency at the boundary where beams fail. A woman mid-stride, cap turned a fraction off center, cardigan the color of lake water, paper bag cradled like a small bird. She was not a ghost. Ghosts are what the living call the parts of themselves that go on strike. She was a fact in a place that had made different decisions about facts. Coffee's fresh, I said, and the word fresh had a shine to it, a diner's shine, chrome and patience. He's waiting. The figure paused in that way people pause when their name is almost said by someone they love. The fog pressed its hands to the glass between worlds and failed to keep its fingerprints off. She shifted her weight toward the line. Don't turn, I said, because Earl had loaned me a rule. Just step straight. She did, and the air made the sound silk makes when a sleeve slides along a coat. The ring in my pocket tugged twice, eager as a dog at the end of a leash who has finally seen the person the walk was for. I took it out and held it steady without extending it. If stories teach anything, it's that you don't hand anything over on a border. Things on borders take what they need without your help. A man coughed behind me, short, exact, a line drawn under a word. Morning, Earl said. He didn't walk into my peripheral. He let the rules stand between us like church pews. Traffic's light. I almost laughed and didn't, because balance is a public resource, and this place had thin margins. She can hear you, I said. She always could, he answered, and that did make me smile, because men sometimes require proof that isn't new to anyone else. The figure's cap pinned itself more firmly to her hair, as if the air had reached up to do what hands were kept from. The paper bag made a small sound, like clean paper chooses to make when it knows its contents matter. She took one step onto the yellow line and then another, and with each, the fog made room and then put the room back the way it was. On the third step she breathed in, a nurse's readying breath, and the world did the courteous thing and changed itself around her. She didn't appear so much as agree to be visible. Claire's face was the kind that remembers every name and how each person prefers their tea. Lines had set in at the corners of her mouth, not from scolding, but from listening to worried people become less worried. Her eyes were the color lakes choose when they want to hide their depth from boaters who overestimate themselves. "Morning," she said, as if we'd all stepped out for a smoke and just returned. She did not look at Earl. She looked at my hand and the ring in it as if it were a thermometer about to tell the truth about a child's fever. "Is it tied?" "It is," I said. "Good," she said. "It keeps the circle honest." Earl's breath thickened the fog behind me. I could feel the heat of a man who had learned to do without noon. "Claire," he said, and in that single word I heard every day they had kept each other from drowning. "Don't turn," I reminded her, soft, and she smiled the smile of a woman who understands both the rule and the man who brought it to me. "I won't," she said. "Not here. What do you need me to do?" My voice felt properly sized in my mouth for the first time in this town. "Return it where the morning knew it," she said. "Then let the road think about circles. Roads don't like to be wrong. Give them a chance to be right, and they will surprise you with how much they remember. There's a trick to doing careful things on a line. You take away the flourish and add patience." I kept my feet exactly on the yellow and moved the ring to my left hand so my right could open the paper bag she held out without reaching across any boundary. Inside lay 2 aspirin in foil, a coin purse, and a folded receipt from a hardware store that used to sharpen skates in winter. I set the ring on the aspirin and folded the bag once, the way a person who plans to use the contents later does. She held it, weight acknowledged, and neither of us pretended it didn't ache. "Thank you," she said. She breathed again, a small square of air. "Now walk." We walked, not fast. 3 people on a yellow line no wider than a promise. Earl's steps sounded like a man on tile working a night shift. Claire's steps were quieter, the barefoot whisper of someone trained to arrive without startling the sick. Mine were the clumsy negotiations of a man who thought he knew about fear before he met the kind that burns clean. The road considered us. The fog changed its mind about what belonged where. A signpost without a sign took on letters "School Speed Limit 20," and then let them go because there was no school here anymore, except the kind that taught a man humility. The ditch deepened on our right and shallowed on our left. Pines leaned in, then leaned back, embarrassed to have stared. At a place no surveyor would ever be able to mark, a scene in the air knit itself with a sound too small for anything but a person listening for it. A stitch pulled through cloth, snugged down, snipped. Claire's shoulders dropped the slightest quarter-inch. Earl's cough came and hid itself in his sleeve. "This is where I leave you," she said, and the strength in her voice was the kind that has no interest in drama. "If I take more of the line, it will take something from the town to pay for it. What would it take?" I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. "Probably a noon," she said, and the joke was hers and his and theirs together. Or the way the lake smells in July when the first hot days come and you think you might make it another year. "Keep your July," I said. "I intend to," she answered. "Make sure the coffee stays fresh." She took one step off the center, and for a breath, the world tried to argue. Then it decided to be graceful. She didn't vanish. She redistributed. Lavender thinned to the memory of lavender. The paper bag made its small paper declaration and settled. The yellow line ran on, unbothered, as if pleased with itself for having done right. Earl didn't speak. Men learn the discipline of shutting up when the important thing finally happens. We stood a while longer, the three of us arranged in a shape the world could tolerate. Wind moved very lightly, as if called to witness and finding itself shy. When we walked back toward my car, the fog took a polite distance. "That was the easy part," Earl said, and I heard something tired but not hopeless take off its coat. "What's the hard part?" I asked. "Convincing the town she arrived," he said, "and teaching the road to stop collecting people just because it can." How do you teach a road? The question felt crazier than anything I'd asked in a hospital where water glowed. "You put up signs," he said, "not the kind with numbers. The kind people tell each other and actually keep." He looked at me with that lake water steadiness. "You tell them not to turn when they hear their name. You tell them to carry a circle when they walk alone in fog. You tell them to pay the landlord." I thought of the penny I'd left on the nurse's station, bright copper on old laminate. "And if they laugh?" "Then you put up the other kind of signs too," he said, practical as a wrench. "Reflectors at the curve, rumble strips where the shoulder pretends. You do the work the living can do, and you let the rest run on the line that doesn't need your permission." We reached the car. The pines let go of a little mist, the way men let go of a little pride when they're among their own. Earl put his hand on the roof near the driver's door, not claiming, just present. "She visit the hospital?" I asked. "The locker?" "When the lavender's right," he said. "When the night shift needs courage they didn't know they had." He straightened, and the years looked at him and decided to keep their distance today. "You should go see Marie. Tell her the clock's finally on time." "It won't be," I said. "Should know what you mean," he said, and the smile did that enormous thing again. He stepped back into the trees with the quiet of a man who has learned to belong to the places between, and the fog admitted him like a club that needs no dues. I started the car. The engine coughed, then settled. The radio found a station playing brass from a parade that had happened 2 towns over and 20 years ago. I pulled onto the road and let the tires hum a note that sounded a lot like gratitude. Back in town, Marie was wiping down the chalkboard with the care of someone who believes clean slates are a civic duty. "Clock's right," I said. She didn't look up. "About time," she said, and the corners of her mouth remembered how to be 20. "Coffee?" "Fresh," I said. "Best kind," she answered, and when she poured, the steam carried the faintest impossible whisper of lavender. Word gets around in towns like Harrow's End, even when mouths stay shut. By late afternoon, people who never admit to superstition were driving 5 miles under, eyes glued to the center line as if it were the last good rule left. Marie topped off my cup without asking and set down a slice of pie that tasted like July, even in November. When I asked what I owed, she shook her head like a woman who just watched a man keep a promise he didn't brag about. By dusk the fog withdrew to the tree line, sulking. Lake Superior spoke in those low paragraphs it keeps for evenings when it arranges itself against winter. I told myself I'd sleep, but there's a kind of wakefulness honest work demands, and the day had more of that left in it. I drove back to Hollow Creek with the window cracked to smell the temperature changing. The hospital idled on the hill, lights long gone, a beached ship remembering storms. Inside, the corridors had the tidy quiet of a house after company leaves. The nurse's station watched me arrive and offered nothing but space. Lavender lived in the air the way old hymns live in wood. Claire hadn't claimed the building. She'd forgiven it a little. Forgiveness has a weight buildings recognize. I left a second penny on the counter heads up. for luck or respect, or both, and turned toward the stair. They counted men as they went down. 32 steps to where the air grows deliberate. The sub-level met me with the thin smile of an understory that has learned my name and decided I could visit without staying. "Evening," Earl said from someplace between a pipe and a decision. His cough came late, like punctuation added out of habit. He stepped out of the tidy dark, same jacket, sleeves rolled to their honest line. In better light, he could have been any of the men who taught me how to lift without hurting my back. In this light, he was the man who had learned to live where noon doesn't always show up. "She arrived," I said. "She did," he answered. That was the statement and the ceremony both. We walked a circuit that wasn't one, past the wire-glass door and the county map with its confessed lies. He lifted the corner of the paper with a calloused thumb and pinned it back with a piece of yellowing tape. "They'll want a story," he said. "Not the kind that keeps people up. A kind that lets them sleep and still tells them what to do. Pay the landlord. Don't turn when the fog says your name. Carry a circle? That story. And fresh coffee fixes more than it should," he added. The smile that never bragged did its quiet work and stopped shy of his eyes, where the lake kept its counsel. "What about this place?" I asked, meaning the tunnels that grew where the ground remembered water. "They'll mind themselves if we mind the road," he said, practical as always. "Places like these like to be useful. If they're not, they get clever. Clever is trouble." A sound moved through the ducts new, not menace, not welcome, more like a building stretching after a long sit. Earl tilted his head, listening the way a man listens for a baby's breath in the next room. "There's one more debt," he said. "To the road?" I asked. "To the shift change," he said. "Nurses who hear a song in the vents and follow it because people like us didn't tell them better." The hospital learned to hum without asking. We trailed the sound into the old surgical wing, where tile remembers more footsteps than any accountant ever will. The calendar under the handless clock still held its last Thursday blank. That blank had always bothered me. It looked too much like permission. The humming started small, a thread drawn through cloth. It laid itself into the vents with the practiced care of a nurse smoothing a sheet. Claire's tune altered. The interval had borrowed it and changed 2 notes. Buildings keep what they can steal and pretend they made it. Earl killed his light. In the slim dark, the hum resolved into direction. "Listen for the cough in the song," he said. "If it's there, it's ours. If it's not, it belongs to the place." I did, and after 16 beats had never agreed on a tempo. A cough sat in the melody like a man sitting on a bed edge at 3 a.m. Honest, there was comfort in it. A hand on a shoulder telling you the night is long and survivable. "We can teach it," Earl said. "Give it a job. Bring it the shape of something that tells the truth to tired people and doesn't ask for anything back." "What shape?" I asked. He grinned fast, like a boy stealing apples with the farmer looking the other way. "A thermos," he said. "We did it the way midnight demands. No fuss, all function." Marie sent us with 2 dented green Stanley thermoses from a back shelf where small towns store their genius. I filled one at her pot until the lid bit down steam. Earl carried it like a sacrament. Down in the sub-level, beneath the crosshatch of lives lived and catalogued, we set the thermos under the intake grill at the base of the nurse's station. The hum nosed the lid, found the heat, and braided itself around the promise. "Music knows how to work." "Nurses follow coffee," Earl said. "Better the hum lead them here than into places that charge interest." We watch the steam lace the air you can't see until something kind enters it. In that warmth, the humming rounded, softened, and lost its hunger. The building learned a new trick and seemed pleased with itself. "Now for the curve," he said, meaning the mile north, or maps misbehaved. "You'll need someone who can talk the county into paint and rumble strips." "Marie knows a cousin," I said, because of course she did. He put his hand out, not to shake, but to steady. I realized the floor under us had shrugged a little, nothing dramatic, just the earth declaring itself alive. In the old days, men would have called it settling and gone on with their work. Now, with our tunneling and our keeping of intervals, it meant more. He leaned, listened again. His breath hitched one notch. "What?" I asked. "Storm coming out over the lake," he said. "Not weather. The other kind. The air iodined wet iron, ozone. The grammar of lightning drafted, but not yet signed. Pipes pinged in quick succession, like a xylophone testing its bars. The scene we'd opened nights ago, wraithed once shallow, and stayed shut. You'll want to be upstairs when it lands," Earl said. "This place bargains better with the roof on." We climbed the counted stair. 32 steps, and each one said our names without making a sound. In the main corridor, the red exit burned like a friend's taillights in heavy snow. Outside, the wind had made up its mind. Pines explained themselves to each other. Over the lake, a sheet of dark walked low, the kind of darkness that has a job to do. The first strike hit someplace no one had named in years. The hospital felt it and disagreed, not violently, but like an old man shifting his weight to favor the knee that remembers a ladder fall. In the parking lot, gravel skittered and found new arrangements. I thought about the road and its lies, and didn't like the idea of lightning teaching it any new ones. "Come on," I said, and Earl didn't ask, or because there was only one answer worth any trouble: the curve. 2 trucks from the county had already nosed onto the shoulder by the time we reached it. Men in reflective vests held clipboards, and the peculiar patience of people whose jobs start when weather happens. Marie's cousin stood with them, hat pulled low, mustache committing to its choices. A woman from the volunteer fire department braced her boots like the wind was a dog that needed reminding. "You brought the one who coughs," she said when she saw Earl. Her voice had the middle notes of a person who hears more than she speaks. "He showed himself," I said. It wasn't a secret by then. Towns learn their out loud faster than cities. She nodded once and pointed with her chin at the shoulder where the old grade showed itself like a bruise under makeup. "We'll run rumble where the ditch lies about being road," she said. "Put posts where fog pretends to be a lane. Paint a line the color even stubborn men can see. And a sign," Earl added. "Not the kind with numbers." She smiled. "The quick kind that means both yes and I already did." A sheet of aluminum leaned against her truck, hand-lettered with a warning: estate would never approve, and drivers would obey anyway. "Don't turn for your name. Stay on the line." Lightning stitched the horizon. Rain started, not big, not showy, the practical sort that soaps the road, and then makes you decide whether you are a person who slows down or a person who tells stories about not slowing down at reunions. The first rumble strip cutter screamed alive, and the machine chewed neat intervals into the asphalt corrugations that make steering wheels say, "Pay attention," in a language even the proud understand. While they worked, I walked the line. The fog did its best to be theatrical and failed. It's hard to get applause when a town has decided to be useful. I stopped where the seam had once taken Claire's foot and set my palm an inch above the paint. Warm from friction and use and a little pride. "You don't get to collect," I said to the line, to the ditch, to the years that tried to stack themselves for mischief. "You get to carry. That's the job." Behind me, Earl's cough agreed. He stood just inside the tree line, where a man can see without being counted. If storms had rules, he had learned which ones applied. Night came honest and early. Work lights turned the curve into a stage where the play was safety. The men with clipboards checked boxes they felt in their shoulders. The volunteer firefighter poured coffee from a thermos that smelled faintly, impossibly, like lavender. For once, the impossible wasn't alarming. It felt like a correct conclusion. "Tell them at the diner," Marie's cousin said, as he signed his name where the county likes names. "Tell them in church." Tell them at the bait shop where stubborn men go to hear their own thoughts out loud. If they turn when someone says their name in fog, they'll wake up someplace short on noon. I'll tell them, I said, and I'll tell it right. He nodded, satisfied. Some people do a job because it's on the list. Others do it because it fits their shape. This fit his. On the drive back, the radio gave me a crackle, and then a voice from a station that doesn't exist at this latitude, preaching safety in the measured drawl of a man who has used a shovel more than a podium. I listened until the hospital rose, and the voice went polite and left me to my own judgments. Inside, the humming in the vents wrapped itself around the thermos like a cat around a warm ankle. The nurse's station looked less alone. Down the hall, by the window that had once reflected a woman standing behind a foolish man, the glass showed only my face and the lines I'd earned. That felt like a bargain I understood. At the locker room, I put my hand on Dalton C. and didn't open it. Some doors are better thanked than used. Lavender said its quiet piece. Something small shifted on the other side, a hairbrush deciding to lean, a cardigan settling its own weight. Coffee's fresh, I said to the air, to the vents, to the places that have learned our voices. The road remembers. The signs are up. From the stairwell, a shoe sole turned on tile with a patient squeak. Not bare feet, not mine, exact and familiar. See you in the morning, Earl said, and though morning is a thing that cheats some men, I believed him. Morning came as if it had been negotiated rather than granted. The lake hammered itself flat under a north wind, and the town behaved like a place that had decided to live a little longer. At Marie's, men who always talked about bait talked about paint and rumble strips. Women who knew exactly who needed casseroles spoke softly about signs that told the kind of truth a person can keep. The clock over the counter behaved 10 minutes slow, as ever, but true to itself, and that was its own sort of faithfulness. I walked the road and read the work we'd put on it. The new reflectors bit the fog and chewed it into smaller problems. Rumble strips hummed a warning tuned to the frequency of stubborn. The sign hand lettered, unapproved, correct caught headlights just so, and sent advice into cabins where names sometimes sounded too sweet through glass. Back at Hollow Creek, the hospital let me in like a relative who'd learned my knock. Lavender lived in the vents without haunting. At the nurse's station, the thermos sat where we'd left it, warm enough to talk the hum into kindness. I poured a capful and set it on the counter, steam making a small weather of its own. Buildings understand offerings better than arguments. I wanted to believe the story had reached the part where men put away their tools and stand around nodding at the work. That hope lasted exactly as long as it takes for a building to clear its throat. The hum slipped a beat. Not wrong, exactly. Not hungry. But there was an echo in it that didn't belong to this place. A borrowed cadence, a rhythm learned from elsewhere. I followed it down the hall to radiology, where machines sat like dozing animals, and the light through the blinds made the old dust look like secrets, finally agreeing to come forward. In the glass of a darkened viewing room, a reflection stood that didn't match my own. A woman, not Claire, hair pinned back with the kind of efficiency that admits no vanity, stared past me with the brand of concentration you see in nurses who have an order to place and a code in progress. Her badge sat crooked on her pocket. L. Mullen, R.N. The name printed itself into me with the sharpness of a paper cut. "Ma'am," I said without turning. The rule held. No turning when the edge is thin. "You're hearing a hum that sounds like it wants you to be brave. It's telling me to go downstairs," she answered, voice flat with duty and caffeine. "We don't go down there anymore." "Good," I said. "Don't. Take your break where the coffee is. The landlord prefers rent in steam today." She didn't move. In the reflection, her eyes flicked toward the hall where the stare counted men. "We can't leave I2 short," she said, and the sentence wore scrubs and rubber soles. and the memory of nights when hospitals asked for more than people should give. "The ICU will forgive you for 5 minutes," I said. "Alive patients like their nurses to keep being people." The hum softened as if embarrassed to have asked the wrong thing. In the glass, Mullen's shoulders eased a fraction, the kind of fraction that keeps a person from snapping in the middle on a long shift. She looked down, and her badge settled straight, as if air had developed fingers. Then the reflection was only mine again, and the room went back to being a room. I found Earl in the sublevel before I found my breath. He stood near the wire glass door, hand on the push bar, like a man steadying something other people can't feel. "It's learning too fast," he said without being asked. "From her?" I said. "From Claire?" "From everyone we brought into the story," he said. "From the thermos and the sign, and the way you say certain words like you plan to keep them." "I can talk to Marie," I said. "We'll move the coffee upstairs. Keep the hung close to the light." He shook his head. "You can't stop buildings from learning. You can only give them better teachers." We walked the spine of the corridors like men checking fence lines after a storm. The damp on the floor had retreated to a civilized sheen. Pipes settled into their octave. In the locker room, Dalton C. wore lavender like a light sweater. Across the row, near the corner, a locker no one had looked at bloomed a smell like wet paper and old peppermints. I wiped the nameplate with my sleeve. Mullen, L. Inside hung a jacket that had outlasted 2 winters, and a schedule folded to a softness. That meant it had been taken out and put back more than one kind of necessary. In the pocket, a paper wristband with a patient's name, the adhesive matted with lint. I cupped it in my palm, and a small pain moved through my chest that had nothing to do with the heart and everything to do with being made of days. "She listens when rules are written clearly," Earl said. "She'll bring the rookies by the sign and point at the words until the stubborn ones say them aloud. But nights make mentors of us, whether we want the job or not." The hum drifted toward us and, bless it, got shy. I set the wristband back in the pocket and closed the door. "We need a different kind of lesson," I said. "Something that runs on habit." Earl looked at the thermos cup in my hand, the steam giving its small sermon. "Rounds," he said. "Hospitals love rounds. Even when they're empty, they like the idea. We built it like you build anything worth trusting. Simple, repetitive, with room for people to be people." At the top of each hour, the hum would thicken near the nurse's station, a sound like a shoe sole turning on tile, then a hush, then the smallest clink, the thermos lid tapped twice. That would be the signal for the living to check on the living, to walk the line of rooms the way farmers walk fence eyes on corners, hands on latches, names spoken right. It would mean, if you're tired, be tired in a place with light. If you hear your name, answer in the break room. If the night asks you for more than you have, let it ask, and then hand it coffee instead. We rehearsed it once, like a couple of fools in a basement, and the building, God bless it, learned the steps with a willingness that made me like it more than any new thing with a warranty. At the hour, the hum came forward, the shoe turned, the lid clicked. In that pattern, a person could rest without being invisible. The town adjusted around the same time the hospital did. Marie's cousin brought me a stack of photocopies, the county's best attempt at making our hand-lettered truth legitimate without killing it. We posted them at the start of footpaths and at the church where fog collects after evening services. At the bait shop, the sign went crooked on purpose, so men would have to touch it to make it straight and read the words with their hands. Kids rode bikes on the center line in the afternoon when the road was warm, coached by grandfathers who had decided to live long enough to be inconvenient. There was a wedding the next weekend in a backyard where the grass hadn't given up yet. People danced on plywood laid over the soft spots. When the fog thickened toward 11, the D.G. Marie's nephew killed the strobe and put on brass, a song that could have been from a parade 2 towns over 20 years ago. Guests walked to their cars in pairs, straight on the gravel, calling each other by anything but their first names until doors shut and latches caught. Rules don't last unless they get turned into customs, and customs don't last unless they remember joy. On a Thursday, the calendar under the handless clock filled its blank. Someone no one confessed took a pen from the station and wrote in the square, "Arrived." The word shone a little until it didn't, the way most miracles do when they become part of the way a place operates. Not everything smoothed. The lake kept its arguments with wind. A tourist ignored the sign and turned his head when fog said his name like a warm palm on the back of his neck. He spent 3 hours walking a line that wasn't there and came back with salt at his temples and a story that made him quiet for a week in a way his friends couldn't tease him out of. A teenager cut the rumble strips with a skateboard wheel and learned more than he planned to. The hospital cried now and then in the way old wood cries, harmless and necessary. And still, something in the ground asked its last question. It arrived on a Sunday before dawn, the hour when fishermen decide whether they are heroic or sensible. I woke to the sound of rain, serious about its intentions, and the sense of absence beside me that didn't belong to any person I'd ever earned. I knew before my feet hit the floor that the scene we had shut had decided to breathe again. In the sublevel, the air tasted like iron filings and the afterthought of lightning. Earl stood at the seam, hands at his sides, not stopping, not urging, only present the way men are when they suspect the future might be asking for them specifically. "You don't have to," I said, and meant it. "Sometimes you do," he answered, and meant that too. The road stopped collecting. The hospital stopped calling people downstairs for the wrong things. There's a debt left that looks like my size. I wanted to make a speech about fairness, but fairness is a poor carpenter. He put his hand to the stone, and the door remembered him. It receded, the throat opened, and the interval lay there with its raised strip and its air the color of after storm. Rules? I asked, because saying them out loud helps them be real. Don't turn, stay on the line, pay the landlord. Carry a circle you don't mind missing for a while, he said. And when you hear your name, decide who has earned it. Coffee's fresh, I said, and he smiled in a way that showed me the boy he had been when mornings came easier. Tell her, he said. Tell the rookies. Tell the men at the bait shop who think rules are for other people. Tell the ones like me who need it put in a voice that doesn't make them feel small. The hum stepped forward, shoe on tile, lid clicked twice. We had taught the building to say goodbye the way people can bear it. See you in the morning, I said. He walked onto the line as if he'd been doing it in his sleep for years. He didn't look back, and that was the most loving thing he could have done for us. The fog shaped itself around him, not like a thief, but like a tailor making an old coat new. He moved until the air decided it had enough of being visible, and then he was less seen and more present. I stood by the seam until the light from the stair decided to be helpful. Above, the hospital took its rounds. Shoo, hush, click. On the road, trucks slowed where they should. In town, a clock continued to be itself. Somewhere in the interval, two people met exactly where they had intended to all along, and a circle drew itself and did not close, because circles that close stop being useful. When I came up, Marie poured without asking and set down a second cup across from mine. She didn't say who it was for. There are sentences you don't make other people say. We drank like a town that had decided to savor the parts of the day no one can steal. That night, I walked the mile alone. The sign caught my eye and didn't need to. The rumble strips said their piece to my rented tires. I stopped where the ditch lies and the line runs true and put my palm an inch above the paint. Warm, from friction and use and a little pride. Fog pressed close and then remembered itself. Arrived, I said, and watched the word shine until it didn't, the way most miracles do when they're working. A town learned to breathe at the same pace as the lake. That's how it felt in the weeks that followed. Like Harrow's End had matched its pulse to something older than misfortune and smarter than superstition. The sign at the curve took on fingerprints. The rumble strips were a shine the county men admired like good joinery. At the hospital, the round signal shoe, hush, click-nested into the hours so cleanly that even the new hires walked to it without asking why. Rules had become customs. Customs had become care. Care had become the way we told each other what we owed the night. The story might have ended there if it belonged to tidy people. But towns and tunnels and roads have their own appetites. An appetite is not a villain. It just needs a job. One more edge waited, not to take, exactly, but to see if anyone remembered how to give on purpose. It arrived in the thin blue that passes for dawn in February. Lake Superior had ironed itself into sheet metal, and the wind played it for a drum. The power stuttered once in Marie's, and then behaved, as if the town and the grid had negotiated a rate for mercy. I drank coffee that did not admit to being extraordinary and walked the mile north, because habit is better than courage. Fog hadn't made up its mind yet. The line shone the color of old hay. At the seam where the road had once lied and no longer did, the paint held a warmth that didn't come from weather. I stood with my palm an inch above it and felt the faintest tug, like a thread asking to be pulled or a fish testing a fly. Not trouble, not yet. More like curiosity 3 days after a miracle, nosing around the edges for more. Morning, I said to the ditch that had learned to be ditch and to the line that had learned to be line. You're doing fine. Something stepped out of the trees, wearing a uniform. I knew too well to be nervous about. A boy's jacket growing into a man's shoulders. Boots a half size too big, because money works that way. Hair that hadn't decided if it would deserve a comb. He lifted 2 fingers in a greeting that belongs to mornings and fishing docks. Sir, he said, not because I deserved it, but because someone had raised him to practice the muscle that keeps a town alive. Truck slid last night. Nobody hurt. Guardrail did its job. Sign still up. You came to look anyway, I said. Dad did, he answered, and something proud and shy shared the sentence. Said I should see where the line changes its mind. Said he wouldn't turn if I said his name. He didn't, either. We stood in wind that held on to what it had taken from the lake and made it respectable. He scuffed his heel, not on the paint, God bless him, but near it, and then thought better of it and put his hands in his pockets. You hear it? He asked, like a hum that learned its manners. I hear it, I said. It says take your break where the light is. He nodded, and the nod had the shape of his father's maybe and his mother's probably. Granddad says you brought someone home who didn't make it in 78, he said, and the year fell out of his mouth like a place in a song he already knew the words to. He says you and the guy with the cough taught the road to stop showing off. Your granddad's generous, I said. Granddad says be specific, he answered, and I had to work not to laugh out loud because towns save their best lines for when they'll be reused. He says the man with the cough went walking. He did, I said, and the wind slid a little sweetness in from the west old wood. Hot lamplight, lavender at the edge, like a promise that isn't loud. The boy looked down the line, then up into the trees as if they might vote. You think he got where he was going? He asked. He tried to say it like a joke and didn't succeed, and that was to his credit. I think some places we call, there are just names for the part of the road where we stop needing to narrate, I said. He walked the line. He knew the rules. He didn't turn. The boy breathed out, and the breath did what breaths do when they become part of weather. I'm Gabe, he said, as if that solved anything and everything. Dad's Earl, Granddad's Earl too. Makes it easy or hard, depending. The world moved sideways half an inch without anyone falling. It was in the way he held the name. Ordinary as bread, serious as a vow, spoken to nobody in particular, and everybody listening. I swallowed something that didn't need a name and shook his hand because men ought to when it matters. "Your dad," I started. "Works nights sometimes," he said, and the breeze turned the words so I could read them at more than one angle. "Says lunch is always either on time or early. Says mornings are the best part, even if you miss some. Tell him the coffee's fresh," I said. It wasn't clever. It was correct. He shoved his hands deeper, looked at the painted words on the aluminum that the state hadn't asked for, and the town had not apologized for. "Don't turn for your name. Stay on the line." He read them the way a person reads something he plans to carry under his tongue in case of emergencies. We walked back toward town together, not because I needed to show him the route, but because walking in company is how roads learn their manners. At Marie's, he held the door the way his grandfather had taught him, and took a stool like he had earned the right and the appetite. Marie poured without asking, because that's her religion. When Gabe paid, he set a penny heads up beside the register. Marie pressed it once with her thumb and left it where it landed. "Landlords like to know you've remembered the lease." The hospital had its own Sunday. Kids in town jackets cut through the lot to kick a ball against the brick, because winter makes rebels out of good children. The round signal found them at the hour and made them quiet for 3 beats without anybody shushing them. And then the game went on better for it. Inside, the locker room held its small geography. Dalton sea-breathed lavender the way a shoreline breathes fog. Mullen, Elle kept peppermint and paper and the tired bravery of night staff in her pocket. The calendar under the handless clock took ink when it needed to and held back when it didn't. I checked the thermos, reheated the lesson, tightened the lid until metal told me we understood each other. The hum took its cues like a good choir. Shoo, hush, click. Nurses answered with names said right. Men in maintenance answered with hands on valves and a grammar of wrenches. A janitor named Theo whistled a hymn his grandmother liked and tuned it to the vents. And for the first time in a long time the building learned a melody it didn't try to own. On my last night in Harrow's End, the lake calmed down and the sky borrowed back a few stars. I walked the mile and stopped where we had decided the world should be obvious. In the ditch, water made small decisions with nothing at stake. The sign caught a little moon. The rumble strips sang when a county truck drifted and corrected like a man who has chosen to see his children again in the morning. Claire stood where a person could stand without making trouble. Not a ghost. Never a ghost. A fact, and kinder for having been argued with. Cardigan lake water blue. Cap a fraction off center, because work prefers duty to elegance. She held a paper bag that had been folded and unfolded enough to know its job. "Coffee's fresh," I said, because manners are the only magic that always works. "Good," she said. "They listen better when their hands are warm." We stood like neighbors watching weather from separate porches. You don't step onto the line for conversation. You let the line run through the talk and do its work. "He walked," I said. "No more than that." "He did," she answered. "No less. He didn't turn. Morning suits him," I said, and the wind snuck a laugh between us with a sound like a screen door deciding not to slam. "It always did," she said. "Tell the rookies he'll cough when it matters. They don't have to be brave in the wrong direction. Consider them told," I said. "The sign's holding. Signs hold if people do," she said. "Make sure the story stays boring in the right places." She lifted the paper bag, checked its shape, set it back against her hip, and stepped one pace into the fog that had accepted its demotion to weather. She didn't vanish. She redistributed. Lavender found a smaller volume to occupy and did it well. When I turned toward town, a truck eased through the curve and hummed the strips like a man testing a chord on a guitar he loved more than he admitted. He didn't turn when his passenger said his name. He tapped the sign with 2 fingers, not out of superstition, but in solidarity. Back at Marie's, the clock did its faithful wrongness. People left their coats on chairs and their grudges at the door. Gabe read a map and put it down and said out loud to nobody in particular, "Maps don't come down here," and grinned because he'd earned the right to quote. "You leaving?" Marie asked, not putting any weight on the answer. "Tomorrow," I said. "Road's calling my name. Don't turn," she said, and we both enjoyed it. I slept upstairs under the painting of birches with one light on, because some habits aren't fear, they're gratitude. Before dawn, I wrote out what a road can be taught and what a town can remember, and what a hospital is for when it stops trying to be a museum of grief. I wrote the rules the way a person writes a recipe he doesn't want ruined by experts. Stay on the line. Don't turn for your name in fog. Pay the landlord. Carry a circle. Tie it if you have to. If you can't be brave, be patient. If the night asks for more than you have, offer coffee. If you hear a cough, you're not alone. Make rounds. Shoo, hush, click. I left a copy at the nurse's station, under the thermos lid, a copy in Marie's drawer, taped to the bottom like you hide cash in lean years, and a copy tacked under the handless clock so the blank days would have something useful to do. I folded one for my pocket, because men who walk alone sometimes forget that they aren't. On the way out of town, the mile marker flashed a number I won't write down. Numbers belong to governments in grief. The line ran straight into clean morning. The lake wore winter well. In the rear view, Harrow's End looked like a place that had decided to be older without getting smaller. Past the county line, fog tried my name the way a salesman tries a door. He knows you're home behind. The sign wasn't there to help me this time. The rumble strips hadn't been cut into this slab. Still, rules have a way of traveling once they've proved themselves. The voice came soft, a teacher's hand on a shoulder. "Owen," it said, like it knew me and liked me enough not to steal. The wheel gave a whisper to the right, like a dog testing your authority. "Coffee's fresh," I said, out loud, to nobody and to everything. "But you'll have to come to the light for it." The road didn't argue. The ditch sulked and minded its business. The line held me like a friend who doesn't hug because he knows better, and the morning opened where it should. Far behind, at a hospital that keeps better hours now, a shoe turned on tile, a hush agreed, and a lid clicked twice. And somewhere exactly where it belonged, a calendar under a handless clock kept watching ordinary days arrive like grace. If anyone asks later why this one ended different, say it's because a town told itself the right boring story at the right time, and meant it. Say it's because a nurse taught the line a melody, and a man who coughed walked where he needed to without turning, and people who had no use for legends put up reflectors anyway. Say it's because we remembered that the planet is old, the fog is ordinary, and the road wants to carry, not keep. And when you're out after dark, and the weather makes a country of its own, and your name comes from the fence line, like a kindness with teeth, keep your eyes on the paint, keep your circle tied, and let the night be night without offering it your noon. The rest will take care of itself.